Hello everyone, can you hear me? I didn't bring any fancy presentation, as I was hoping you would focus on my bizarre hairstyle anyway. Hello to you. I'm Magda. I come from Poland, and I'm a research analyst, and also I'm a co-lead for the European Pride group in Nielsen. And I will talk a little bit personally today. So I was born in Poland in the 80s in a small town near the border of Germany and Czech Republic. I was only 4 when Poland regained its freedom and ceased to be a communist country. And it was a huge change for everybody. Suddenly, we had cable TV with MTV playing rock and pop music. And we could go to a shop and buy Coca-Cola. And it was a big deal. But because we were closed for so long, there were topics and discussions that were non-existent in Poland. Unfortunately, LGBT matters were among them. So I was growing up with this lack of knowledge, and I slowly was discovering that I'm a little bit different from my colleagues and my classmates. I was listening to different kinds of music. I was wearing different types of clothes. And also I was strangely uninterested in boys. I didn't know the reason back then. It wasn't until I saw one episode of a very popular animation series back then, Sailor Moon. There was one episode which introduced a couple of girls who were clearly in a relationship, and this was a tipping point for me. Suddenly, it all made sense. So it was a starting point for me to start researching the subject. And it wasn't as easy as it is now. I couldn't just log into Google and type in a few words. I needed to use the resources that I had back then. So I browsed every book I could find. I searched articles in magazines. And I watched every movie that had homosexuality in it. So by the time I was 13, I was ready to come out to myself as not straight. I wasn't so confident to call myself a lesbian, but I knew I was not heterosexual. And I was ready to share this news with my friends and my family. And I was very lucky in this regard, because it wasn't easy to be a gay person back then in Poland. And actually, my friends accepted me for who I was. My family, after the initial shock, they have been very supportive for me. But I knew that society would like me to keep quiet about who I am, that my sexual orientation was something that I should be ashamed of. And I wasn't. I didn't want to be. So in the high school, when I was ready to identify myself as a lesbian, I made this specific promise to myself that I would never ever lie about who I am. It was quite brave, equally naive, but I tried to live by this promise. Though I did leave a tiny loophole there. I reasoned that as long as I'm not explicitly lying about who I am, I wasn't breaking the promise. So every kind of omission, changing the subject, it was still okay. And I did exactly like that. I just opted out from the conversation. Because let's face it, coming out is a very straining experience. It's an everyday experience with every new person that you meet, with every conversation that you lead. You are just doing this calculation, which I'm calling a risk assessment. So you are doing a calculation. What are the gains and losses of me being honest about who I am? how the other person would react, and what would be the outcome. And back then, it was much easier to just admit the topic. And I operated like that for a very long time. In 2014, I joined Nielsen on very junior position. And the beginning was very typical for me. So I did the risk assessment on my closest teammates, and I opened up to them. However, I didn't feel the courage or need to come out to everybody else in the company. One day I was browsing through the internal resources in Nielsen, and I found out that Nielsen has employee resource groups, among them Women in Nielsen and Pride. And for me, it was a huge discovery, because suddenly I was in a company that cared about minorities and cared about me. So immediately I joined Women in Nielsen, and I wanted to join Pride, but unfortunately it turned out that this group was only available for US associates. So when half a year later, when I received an invitation for the first European Pride meeting, I knew I needed to participate. And here I was. There was like 10 of us there. We didn't have a clue of what we are doing. And there was Jim, our leader, who came from US and tried to implement how the ERGs were working in the US. And step by step, we moved towards officially launching Pride Europe, which happened another 6 months later. And it was a huge success. We doubled the numbers of members. And by then, I was a very active member. I shared my ideas. I helped to organize poster campaigns or like rainbow cookie selling actions. But in April 2016, our leader needed to go back to US. And we faced the challenge to find somebody who could replace him. And to my surprise, it turned out that most of the members would see me as a new leader. Of course, I was happy, I was glad. However, I felt this uncertainty because, as I told you, I was on this junior position. I didn't have a clue about overall strategy of a company, about the diversity and inclusion matters. But I had a lot of energy and lots of ideas. And I thought that this might be enough. So I became a leader then. And soon after that, we had our first big action of Pride Europe. We decided to create a video for International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia with local market leaders sharing why they support diversity and inclusion. And I, as a leader, was also a part of this video. And I didn't know what I could say, what important I could say. But I opted for being honest and open. And for the first time in my life, I openly stated that I'm a lesbian and I know how important it is to be yourself at work. And the video turned out to be very successful when we shared it among our European associates. So people praised the openness of the leaders. But for me, it had even greater impact, because suddenly I was out to everybody at the company. And whenever I met somebody new, I suddenly didn't feel the need to do the risk assessment. I could jump straight into conversation. And I just assumed that the person knew about me, about my sexual orientation, and it lifted a great burden from my shoulder. And it's been over a year since that event. And our Pride Europe group has really grown. And well, we've organized many activities such as more Pride poster events or like webinars, videos. For me, it has been a long journey as well. I've got to network with senior leaders. I've got to be a representative for Nielsen Pride internally and externally. And I've also been promoted. And one of the reasons for my promotion was because of my involvement in Pride. So if there is one thought that I would like you to take from this speech is do not treat being an LGBT person as a weakness, because that's a common thing to do. You're entering a new job and, well, you're thinking that, yeah, maybe my sexual orientation can be an obstacle to get a promotion, or it can influence badly the relationship with coworkers. But really, the amount of energy that the one is wasting on hiding who they are, it's not worth it. I would even take it one step forward. Make being an LGBT person your strength. If there is like a pride group in your company, then join it and be active, be open and share your ideas. If there isn't a pride group, maybe start a conversation why there isn't one. And be bold, because being an LGBT, it's not a defect, it's your additional benefit. And I will leave you with that thought. Thanks.